All right. Live on YouTube, live on Instagram. What's going on, beautiful people? What's going on? What's going on? I hope you all are doing well this Tuesday morning. Uh, yeah, I'm glad you're here. Glad you're alive. If nobody's told you yet, I'm happy you're here. I'm happy you're alive. Welcome to the party. All right, we are. Sorry for the late start in today. Welcome to Reading with Jam. I am Jam. I'm Jamal Calpin, and for those, I'm live streaming on Instagram and I'm live streaming on my YouTube channel, The Beneficial Black Man. So for those who don't know, my name is Jamal Calpin. I am an actor, content creator, person who wants to help people live for glory and for good. And more specifically, I want to help Black men to overcome gray mediocrity so that we can live a vibrant and excellent life. And so I try to focus on doing that by helping us discuss faith, art, and other things, but also working on mental and emotional health management. Because I think the way we think impacts the way we behave, impacts what we believe, and that ultimately impacts our actions. So we got to address that stuff. We got to change the way we think so that we can change what we believe, so that we can change the way that we act. Right. I was getting ready to start reading, but my Kindle wants to update right now. So I'm waiting for that to stop updating. And then I guess we'll get into reading. But this will be part 3 of reading through Brene Brown's the Atlas of the Heart. And if my Kindle doesn't decide to work well, then maybe I won't read today. I mean, technically, I could pull it up on my computer. So I think we'll give it a few more seconds. Anyways, I hope you all are doing well. This is new. It's been a while since my Kindle updated. But all right, let me do some hold music kind of stuff. For those who celebrate Halloween, what are you dressing up as? What are you dressing up as? I personally don't celebrate Halloween, but I understand it's what people do. You know, I, as an American citizen, I respect and, make space for people to do the things that they want to do. But yeah, I grew up Christian, and I'm still a believer in the Most High. And Halloween wasn't really a big thing. And then, the older I got, the more distant I became with Halloween. And okay, I think we're working now. But yeah, so this is an interesting day for those who are like super believers. Happy Reformation Day. All right, I should say super Christians. Oh wait, oh no, I don't think it's ready yet. Okay, here we go. Okay, we're in there. Let's get it going. All right. So, like I mentioned, we are reading through Brene Brown's The Atlas of the Heart. And the whole point of me doing this is just my mic. The whole point of me doing this is as an actor, as a voice actor, I want to practice narrating and reading. Practicing in public is a good way to do that. But I also want to read self-help, personal development content for my own benefit. And I also want to share with you, particularly if you're a Black man, because for some reason, we don't read a lot. And for some other reason, we don't like to read certain, or we're not encouraged to read. I'll just say that. I mean, I think people encourage us to read books like this, but I think because of patriarchy and misogyny and stuff like that, we don't delve into a lot of the personal development books that touch on growing our soul. So I want to share that stuff so we can read through it together, and you don't have to feel alone. You'll be like, oh man, I've been secretly reading Brene Brown, or I've been secretly reading Bell Hooks and any other books that you feel are too feminine or feminist movement or whatever that crap is. But all right, we're jumping in. This is chapter 1 of The Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. Put my time on the clock. I'm only going to read for 30 minutes and maybe share a little commentary and then get out of your way. But let's do it. Again, apologies for the late start. Hopefully, I'll start at 7 o'clock tomorrow. All right, here we go. Chapter 1. Places we go when things are uncertain or too much. Stress, overwhelm, anxiety, worry, avoidance, excitement, dread, fear, vulnerability. Stressed and overwhelmed. The restaurant is packed. It's loud. Every table is full, and people are lined up out the door. There's at least one angry person at every table who's desperately trying to wave down a waiter. We never got our bread. We need more tea. We've been waiting on our salads for 20 minutes. We need our check unless you don't want us to pay for this crappy service. You can hear the kitchen manager's booming voice through the swinging doors. The food on the line is dying. Let's go. Let's go. We've got desserts ready. We've got desserts ready for table 10 and bread ready for tables 3, 4, and 8. But only one waiter showed up for the shift, and it's me. And I can't speak for some reason, and I'm wearing a bathing suit and huge fins and make it hard to walk and impossible to run. This is one of my least favorite recurring bad dreams. I hate it because after 6 years of waiting tables and bartending for a high pressure, high expectation restaurant group through college and grad school, I know that feeling all too well. We made a lot of money, but we worked our asses off, and the pressure left a mark. Still today, if Steve is in the kitchen and I walk behind him, I'll shout, behind you. And if I spy someone leaning against the counter during a family kitchen cleanup after dinner, I have to stop myself from saying, hey, if you have time to lean, you have time to clean. The language and habits of that job were survival, and they stuck. Weirdly, or maybe not, the majority of my current leadership team have significant restaurant experience. Maybe we attract one another, or maybe I'm just drawn to the capacity for grind. If you work on our team and you step over a sugar packet on the floor because picking that up is someone else's job, you're not a good fit. Stressed and overwhelmed remind me of two restaurant terms that my team and I often use today: in the weeds and blown. Back in the day, if I walked into the kitchen and told another waiter I'm in the weeds, the response would be, what do you need? I might say, can you take bread to tables 2 and 4 and read tea tables 3 and 5, please? Being in the weeds and pulling out of the weeds happened to everyone on almost every shift. It was just part of the job, and you learned to manage it. Walking into the kitchen and saying, I'm blown, well, that's completely different. The kitchen gets really quiet. No one asks what you need. Normally, someone runs to the hostess stand to find out what tables you're running that shift. They don't even assume you know at this point. The kitchen manager, who would never get involved in the weed situation, pulls all the tickets for your guests to evaluate what's happening and immediately assigns your tables to other waitstaff. When you're blown, you can either step outside or into the cooler or go to the bathroom and cry. Whatever you need. You're expected back in 10 minutes, ready to go. But for 10 minutes, there's a complete takeover. In 6 years, it happened to me twice. Both times due to pure exhaustion at the end of triple shifts that I was working because tuition was due. Stressed is being in the weeds. Overwhelmed is being blown. Sorry, it's highlighting. All right. Stressed. We feel stress when we evaluate environmental demand as beyond our ability to cope successfully. This includes elements of unpredictability, uncontrollability, and feeling overwhelmed. I'm going to read that one more time. We feel stressed when we evaluate environmental demand as beyond our ability to cope successfully. This includes elements of unpredictability, uncontrollability, and feeling, overloaded. Stressful situations cause both physiological, body, and psychological, mind and emotion reactions. However, Regardless of how strongly our body responds to stress, increases in heart rate and cortisol, our emotional reaction is more tied to our cognitive assessment of whether we can cope with the situation than to how our body is reacting. I found this really interesting because I always assumed that my emotions responded to my body freaking out. But really, my emotions are responding to my thinking assessment of how well I can handle something. That's good. Sorry, I'm highlighting. Okay. Just as getting in and out of the weeds is a part of every wait staff shift in a restaurant, navigating stressors in a daily part is a daily part of living. However, daily stress can take a toll. In fact, chronic exposure to stressors can be detrimental to health. High levels of perceived stress have been shown to correlate with more rapid aging, decreased immune function, greater inflammatory processes, less sleep, and poor health behaviors. Overwhelmed. If stress is like being in the weeds, feeling overwhelmed is like being blown. Overwhelmed means an extreme level of stress, an emotional and or cognitive intensity to the point of feeling unable to function. Excuse me. I love excuse me. I love this definition of overwhelmed from the Merriam-Webster online dictionary. Completely overcome or overpowered by thought or feeling. We all know that feeling that washes over us and leaves us completely unsure of what to do next. Even when people ask, "How can I help?" or "What needs to be done?" responding with organized thoughts feels impossible. This is also when I can get really crappy and think to myself, if I had the wherewithal to figure out what comes next and how we need to approach all of this, I wouldn't be walking around in circles crying and talking to myself. Feeling stressed and feeling overwhelmed seem to be related to our perception of how we are coping with our current situation and our ability to handle the accompanying emotions. Am I coping? Can I handle this? Am I inching toward the quicksand? John Kabat-Zinn describes overwhelm as the all too common feeling that our lives are somehow unfolding faster than the human nervous system and psyche are able to manage well. This really resonates with me. It's all unfolding faster than my nervous system and psyche can manage it. When I read that Kabat-Zinn suggests that mindful play or no agenda, non-doing time is a cure for overwhelm, it made sense to me. Why? Sorry. It made sense to me why, when we were blown at the restaurant, we weren't asked to help problem solve the situation. We were just asked to engage in non-doing. I'm sure experience taught the managers that doing nothing was the only way back for someone totally overwhelmed. The non doing also makes sense. There is a body of research that indicates that we don't process other emotional information accurately when we feel overwhelmed, and this can result in poor decision making. In fact, researcher Carol Golm used the term overwhelmed to describe an experience where our emotions are intense, our focus on them is moderate, and our clarity about exactly what we're feeling is low enough that we get confused when trying to identify or describe the emotions. In other words, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm feeling my emotions at about 10. I'm paying attention to them at about 5, and I understand them at about 2. This is not a setup for successful decision making. The big learning here is that feeling both stressed and overwhelmed is about our narrative of emotional and mental depletion. There's just too much going on to manage effectively. Anxiety. For me, anxiety feels like what I lovingly call the Willy Wonka shit tunnel. Okay, here we go. There's a frightening scene in the original Willy Wonka film that starts out as a sweet boat ride through a magical land of supersized candy and turns into an escalating scene of fear and loss of control. As the boat enters a dark tunnel, the mood turns. The boat starts going faster and faster, and while terrible images flash on the walls, including a close-up of millipede crawling over someone's face, a chicken getting its head cut off, and a lizard eating a bug, none of it makes narrative sense. It's just scary and confusing. All of this is happening while the passengers, children, and their parents are freaking out, and Willy Wonka, played by the incredible wild eyed Gene Wilder, is manically reciting this poem at an increasingly frenetic rate. Excuse me. There's no earthly way of knowing which direction we are going. There's no there's no knowing where we are rowing, or which way the river's flowing. Is it raining? Is it snowing? Is a hurricane a blowing? Not a speck of light is showing, so the danger must be growing. Are the fires of hell a glowing? Is the grisly reaper mowing? Yes, the danger must be growing, for the rowers keep on rowing, and they're certainly not showing any signs that they are slowing. That's what anxiety feels like to me. Escalating loss of control. Worst case scenario, thinking and worst case scenario, thinking and imagery in total uncertainty. Hmm. Let me off the boat. As the team and I reviewed the research, what I learned about language and how some of these experiences work together felt like a life jacket for me, something that would keep me afloat if I had to jump off that boat before it headed into the shit tunnel. I hope it does for you too. There is a picture here. I think somebody tweeted it. Let me see if I can show it real quick. I'm gonna read what it says, but it looks like somebody wrote something in a journal, and it says, "You are afraid of surrender because you don't want to lose control, but you never had control. All you had was anxiety." It's kind of deep. Let's continue. The American Psychological Association defines anxiety as an emotion characterized by feelings of tension, worried thoughts, and physical changes like increased blood pressure. Anxiety can be both a state and a trait. To better understand this, let's get clear on what these terms mean. The best exclamation, the best explanation I've come across is from the Oxford Review Encyclopedia of Terms. Here's how they explain it. A trait is considered to be something that is part of an individual's personality and therefore a long term characteristic of an individual that shows through their behavior, actions, and feelings. It is seen as being a characteristic, feature, or quality of an individual. For example, someone who says, "I am a confident person," or "I am just an anxious person," is stating that these attributes are part of who they are. A state, on the other hand, is a temporary condition that they are experiencing for a short period of time. After the state has passed, they will return to another condition. For example, someone who says, "I'm feeling quite confident about this interview," or "I feel nervous about doing this," is describing states. I love their closing sentence, which may be the understatement of the decade. However, working out what is really a trait and what is a state can often be difficult and is the content of much scientific argument at times. So, when we say that anxiety can be both a state and a trait, it means that some of us feel anxious mainly in response to certain situations, while some of us can be naturally more predisposed to anxiety than others. Generalized anxiety disorder is different from both trait and state anxiety. According to Johns Hopkins Medicine, generalized anxiety disorder is a condition of excessive worry about everyday issues and situations. It lasts longer than 6 months, and in addition to feeling worried, you may also feel restlessness, fatigue, trouble concentrating, irritability, increased muscle tension, and trouble sleeping. Approximately one third of US adults will be affected by an anxiety disorder in their lifetime. However, it is estimated that fewer than half of people with diagnosable anxiety disorders seek any type of professional treatment. It's very difficult to work through an anxiety disorder without professional help. I describe myself as having frequent state anxiety with trait rising. Sorry, pick up. I describe myself as having frequent state anxiety with trait rising, and I know that therapy has been essential for me in terms of recognizing and understanding my reactions and developing techniques for working through my feelings of anxiety. I've also had to give up caffeine. Commit to 8 to 9 hours of sleep a night and exercise almost every day. An intolerance for uncertainty is an important contributing factor to all types of anxiety. Those of us who are generally uncomfortable with uncertainty are more likely to experience anxiety in specific situations, as well as to have trait anxiety and anxiety disorders. Like that. Okay, highlight one more thing. Sorry. Okay. Continuing. Okay. Our anxiety often leads to one of two coping mechanisms: worry or avoidance. Unfortunately, neither of these coping strategies is very effective. Worrying and anxiety go together, but worry is not an emotion. It's the thinking part of anxiety. Worry is described as a chain of negative thoughts about bad things that might happen in the future. That's good. That's good. All right. Sorry, I got to highlight that. It's bolded, but I'm highlighting it. I don't care. Excuse me. Continuing. All right. What really got me about the worry research is that those of us with a tendency to worry believe it is helpful for coping. It is not. Believe it is uncontrollable, which means we don't try to stop worrying, and try to suppress worry thoughts, which actually strengthens and reinforces worry. I'm not suggesting that we worry about worry, but it's helpful to recognize that worrying is not a helpful coping mechanism, that we absolutely can learn how to control it, and that rather than suppressing worry, we need to dig into and address the emotion driving the thinking. Avoidance, the second coping strategy for anxiety, is not showing up and often spending a lot of energy zigzagging around and away from that thing that already feels like it's consuming us. And avoidance isn't benign. It can hurt us, hurt other people, and lead to increased and mounting anxiety. In her book, The Dance of Fear, Dr. Harriet Lerner writes, "It is not fear that stops you from doing the brave and true thing in your daily life. Rather, the problem is avoidance. You want to feel comfortable, so you avoid doing or saying the thing that will evoke fear and other difficult emotions. Avoidance will make you feel less vulnerable in the short run, but it will never make you less afraid." That's good. Okay, here we go. The entire premise of this book is that language has the power to define our experiences, and there's no better example of this than anxiety and excitement. Anxiety and excitement feel the same, but how we interpret and label them can determine how we experience them. Even though excitement is described as an energized state of enthusiasm leading up to or during an enjoyable activity, it doesn't always feel great. We can get the same coming out of our skin feeling that we experience when we're feeling anxious. Similar sensations are labeled anxiety when we perceive them negatively and excitement when we perceive them positively. One important strategy when we're in these feelings is to take a deep breath and try to determine whether we're feeling anxiety or excitement. Researchers found that labeling the emotion as excitement seems to hinge on interpreting the bodily sensations as positive. The labels are important because they help us know what to do next. Hmm. Dread occurs frequently in response to high probability. Pick up. Dread occurs frequently in response to high probability negative events. Its magnitude its magnitude increases as the dreaded event draws nearer. Because dread makes an anticipated negative event even worse, we often prefer to get unpleasant things over with quickly, even if doing them sooner means that they will be more unpleasant. As an example, a more painful procedure now is preferred to a less painful procedure later. I felt so called out when I read this. I can convince myself that an experience is going to be disastrous and work myself into a dread frenzy. It's terrible because even if it goes well, I'm so dread exhausted that I can't enjoy it. For anxiety and dread, the threat is in the future. For fear, the threat is now, in the present. Fear is a negative, short lasting, high alert emotion in response to a perceived threat. And, like anxiety, it can be measured as a state or trait. Some people have a higher propensity to experience fear than others. Fear arises when we need to respond quickly to physical or psychological danger that is present and imminent. Because fear is a rapid fire emotion, the physiological reaction can sometimes occur before we can realize that we are afraid. The typical responses are fight, flight, or freeze. In the research, you can find many lists of what elicits fear in us. The items range from rodents and snakes to the inability to see our surroundings, to observing our children in peril. However, no matter how much the lists vary, one item is on every list I've seen: the fear of social rejection. We can never forget that we experience social pain and physical pain in the same part of our brains, and the potential exposure to either type of pain drives fear. To close this section, I want to go back to my friend and mentor, Dr. Harriet Lerner. She writes, throughout evolutionary history, anxiety and fear have helped every species to be wary and to survive. Fear can signal us to act, or alternatively, to resist the impulse to act. It can help us to make wise, self protective choices in and out of relationships where we might otherwise sail mindlessly along, ignoring signs of trouble. Like all of the experiences in this book, both our anxiety and our fear need to be understood and respected, perhaps even befriended. Checking on my time. I've been reading for a while. Okay. Okay. List all of the experiences in this book, both our anxiety and our fear. Oh, yeah, I read that already. I'm sorry, pick up. We need to pull up a chair and sit with them, understand why they're showing up, and ask ourselves what there is to learn. Dismissing fear and anxiety is not useful to our quest for connection. Sorry. Dismissing fear and anxiety is not useful to our quest for connection. Okay, one more time. I got it. Dismissing fear and anxiety is not isn't as dismissing fear and anxiety as not useful to our quest for connection is as dangerous as choosing to live in constant fear and anxiety. Okay, I'm trying to see if it's where. Okay, we're gonna finish off. We're gonna finish off this chapter. Here we go. Let's do it. We got like 7 minutes left. Let's do it. All right. Vulnerability. Vulnerability is the emotion that we experience during times of uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. It first emerged in my dissertation research, and it has been validated by every study I've done since. Through our research and training, we've asked tens of thousands of people to give us examples of vulnerability from their own lives. These are a few of the answers that directly pierce the emotion. The first date after my divorce, talking about race with my team, trying to get pregnant after my second miscarriage, talking about my feelings, starting my own business, watching my children leave for college, remembering that leaders don't have all the answers, but ask important questions, apologizing to a colleague about how I spoke to him in a meeting, sending my son to orchestra practice, knowing how badly he wants to make first chair, and knowing there's a really good chance he will not make the orchestra at all, waiting for the waiting for the doctor to call back, giving and getting feedback, and getting back up to bat after striking out. While these are uncomfortable and difficult experiences, there is no evidence that they are indicators of weakness. In fact, this is one of the biggest myths of vulnerability. We found that across cultures, most of us were raised to believe that being vulnerable is being weak. This sets up an unresolvable tension for most of us, because we were also raised to be brave. There is no courage without vulnerability. Courage requires the willingness to lean into uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. In my most recent research on courage and leadership, the ability to embrace vulnerability emerged as a prerequisite for all of the daring leadership behaviors. If we can't handle uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure in a way that aligns with our values and furthers our organizational goals, we can't lead. Oof. All right. In a world where perfectionism, pleasing, and proving are used as armor to protect our egos and our feelings, it takes a lot of courage to show up and be all in when we can't control the outcome. It also takes discipline and self awareness to understand what to share and with whom. Vulnerability is not oversharing, it's sharing with people who have earned the right to hear our stories and our experiences. I'm sorry. Some good stuff in here. All right. Vulnerability is not weakness, it's our greatest measure of courage. Oh my gosh. Okay, hold on. Went the wrong way. And she has a quote here again. Vulnerability is not weakness, it's our greatest measure of courage. I think that's dope. Okay. That ends, I guess, section one, chapter one. Uh, there's a lot there. Okay, so let me try to quickly recap on some things that stood out to me. So in this section, we covered, or chapter one, section one. It doesn't say chapter, so I don't know. We'll call it chapter for now. It may not be. But all right, chapter one is entitled "Places We Go When Things Are Uncertain or Too Much." She mentioned stressed and overwhelmed. Where's the other one? Anxiety and vulnerability. Again, this is good. This is really good. Stressed and overwhelmed. I feel like that's something that we experience often, but again, we may not pay attention to it. I like the example that she gives about being part of like wait staff. And my wife, she has experience being a waiter. And she's told me that like some of the language that Brene Brown mentions about being in the weeds, uh, I've heard that before, but now tying it to whether it's your mental state or experience or whatever helps add more color to it. Because I think it's a really good image, being in the weeds, or the other one she said was being blown. Like being in the weeds is overwhelmed and blown is just like I can't do it. Like, oh no, she said being in the weeds is like stressed, while being blown is overwhelmed, like it's too much. I think so many of us try so hard to just force our way through being stressed and being overwhelmed. So much so that I think stress, if we don't pay attention to the stress, that'll eventually lead to overwhelm. And then overwhelm can lead to like burnout and ultimately, you getting hurt and, not being able to do anything. But one of the big takeaways that I got from that example that she shares is that she reached out for help. That's something that you had to share with other waiters or share with your staff to be like, yeah, hey, listen, I'm in the weeds or I'm blown. And they came and helped you. They came, and did whatever they needed to do to help you keep doing what you needed to do. And I think that's so important, especially as men. Like, we have to be willing, which again, that requires us to fight against patriarchy. It helps us. We have to fight against toxic masculine ideas and traits, like to admit that I'm in the weeds, like I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I can't do this, or I'm having a very very hard time doing it. But that in itself is requires humility, you know. And I think very often we are taught as men that we can't do that. We can't say that we're stressed. And I think it's also important to be careful who you share that with. You know, I think that's why it's important that we have brothers in our lives, or even mentors that we can reach out to and be like, hey man, I'm not doing so well. I'm stressed. I'm in the weeds. I need help, or I need something. I need something. Um, but we got to be able to do that, because if we don't, it will progress, stress to overwhelmed, and I think eventually burnout. What I really like, what really stood out to me, um, of these different descriptions. Again, I think it's really good that she's giving language to these feelings that very often most of us feel, most of us experience: stressed, overwhelmed, anxious, and vulnerability. Anxiety really stood out to me because hear about it, talk about it, and I feel like I experience it. But I think the one thing that she said that really stuck to me was how anxiety. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. Oh, here we go. All right, this is a quote from Dr. Harriet Harriet Leonard. I'll reread this again. She says, "It is not fear that stops you from doing the brave and true thing in your daily life. Rather, the problem is avoidance. You want to feel comfortable, so you avoid doing or saying the thing that will evoke fear and other difficult emotions. Avoidance will make you feel less vulnerable in the short run, but it will never make you less afraid." I thought that was good that she tied that together with anxiety. So it was anxiety, and then how it manifested was through either worry or avoidance. In reading it and seeing this wording really was eye-opening for me because I never would have tied anxiety towards some avoidant behavior that I have. Um, there have been experiences in difficult situations and conflicts and confrontations that I've had, that I've experienced, that I've gone through, that I freeze up in. And I think I can understand that I was being avoidant and that maybe in that moment I had like high levels of anxiety because I'm anticipating things being the worst. And the gag is when you freeze, and she kind of mentions it in here, saying that avoidance isn't benign. It can hurt us, hurt other people, and lead to increased amount of anxiety. The gag is when you believe, when you let the anxiety sit in, and then you consciously, subconsciously choose the avoidant option, you may think, she says, it's almost like you're seeking comfort, hoping that it's just going to pass over, but it never does. It never gets any better. It just gets worse, and it kind of spirals. And again, this language, it's helpful, um, because maybe it can help me to approach those situations differently. And of course, she goes into the similar feelings of anxiety and excitement. And I've heard that before too. I think Mel Robbins has talked about that, how if you are feeling anxious, you need to tell yourself, I'm feeling excited about this or that, and really reposition and reframe your thoughts about what you're experiencing so that you can use that same energy, because it's all energy. All emotions are is this energy in motion. Um, all that is like you can just, I guess, what's the word? Um, like it's almost like a form of alchemy. I can redivert this energy, or I can transform it into something else. And that's what we need to do. That's what I know I need to do. Like if I am feeling anxious, I need to turn that into excitement so that I can be brave enough to do and confront the things that I need to do. So I thought that was super helpful. And then the last one, vulnerability. Man, oh man. I'm just read one quote and then I'm gonna wrap up because it's been a long time. All right. Vulnerability is not oversharing. It's sharing with people who have earned the right to hear our stories and our experiences. I think that's deep, especially in the time of social media. I think I'm assuming it's still kind of a trend, but the idea of being authentic, being vulnerable, being honest, you know, everyone feels the need or think it's important to just share everything with the world. But that's not always wise. And that's not always the best thing to do. For example, I know there are a lot of brothers who create podcasts who get on and share their grievances about Black women, about society, and all these things. And they garner a large audience, typically of other men, who agree. Do I think that's beneficial? Personally, no, because very often in those conversations, there aren't any helpful or beneficial solutions given. I get it though. Like you're trying to look for a space to be vulnerable so that you can grow and so that you can get help and so that you can, it can be cathartic. I think again, we have to be wise and careful what we're saying, and who we're sharing it to. Not everything needs to be shared on the podcast. Not everything needs to be shared in a social media post. I mean, it's your prerogative. Do what you want to do. But I think you also have to be aware that if you're sharing those kind of things, you're also opening up yourself to critique and, pushback. But anyways, vulnerability in itself really is a superpower. And what was the other quote? Wait, hold on. There is no courage without vulnerability. Courage requires the willingness to lean into uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. But the other thing she said about leadership, and most in my most recent research on courage and leadership, the ability to embrace vulnerability emerged as a prerequisite for all of the daring leadership behaviors. If we can't handle uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure in a way that aligns with our values and furthers our organizational goals, we can't lead. So vulnerability is important to even be a leader. So I think as men, as Black men, we have to embrace and learn how to be vulnerable. And that's it for today. That's the end of the reading. There's still stuff there that I think I'm gonna have to sit with and digest. But I hope there was something in there that you got that was helpful for you to think on and ponder. And maybe you saw yourself in some of these descriptions or these labels of our emotions. I think it's pretty good. I think it's pretty good. Tomorrow will be section 2 or chapter 2, places we go when we compare. I'm looking forward to this. I like this. I like that she's putting language to these emotions and these feelings and using pictures. Again, I really like the image of the wait staff and being in the weeds and overblown. I like the imagery. It's very helpful. But I hope it's helpful to you. I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to y'all later. Peace.